is Israel the modern day equivalence of England for us?
Well, let me start here. Are you denying there's a large demographic of people who argue that Israel does possess an extreme amount of influence over this country and commandeers America away from its own interests?
I want evidence about what Israel's doing. I don't give a damn. 150 million people could believe that anything they want. That doesn't necessarily make that true. So I'm looking for the evidence. I don't care what people believe. I want to know the evidence and why all of a sudden Israel can be the puppet master of the United States. That's what I would like to know.
Well, I mean, there's mountains of evidence. You just got to go looking for it. And we can start with the Epstein files if you wanted to. But the point here was to make that comparison that the revolutionary spirit is settling in the younger generations because they do hold this belief. A country that has been educated over and over again, Israel, largely rising in evangelical, Sunday schools, they are now turning against it. And they view this to be the quote unquote mother country of America. They view Israel across the pond to be this foreign nation that does not have Americans' interest at heart. That's the comparison I was making there. Now, if we want to argue control of Israel, we can. But the point being is the reason why the revolutionary spirit is here is because that's the view and perspective of Israel in its relationship to America.
Well, people can. I understand what you're saying, but why? Okay, if Israel has no control here in America, why are people pissed at? Why are we focusing on Israel?
Israel
in that regard?
Has control here in America. I'm not trying to argue about Israel right now. We can if you want to. The point here is I don't understand why you're trying to deny that. There's a huge demographic of people between both the Groypers and even people further to the right of them that hold the belief that Israel has immense influence and control over this nation. Now, you can say they're wrong, but that doesn't make them disappear.
I
The
totally.
point being is the revolutionary spirit's coming out of this camp because they find it to be a hostile takeover. That's the comparison.
Okay, so I totally hear what you're saying. I would look at anybody. I don't care who you are, and I don't care how many of you are, and I don't care what you believe. But if you're going to say that somebody has a hostile takeover going, and that is going to, in theory, justify a revolution, you're drawing parallels between what we did with us in England and now us in there. I'm going to challenge people back and say, you've got to show evidence for that. You've got to show not only just a little bit of what I think or I believe or the connection between an Epstein file, really, because of what it sounds like you're saying is that Israel's the puppet master to America.
Correct.
And I was looking at people going, show me the evidence. Show me the evidence that Israel's pulling the strings for Donald Trump.
So Chuck, just to jump in on Atlas's point here, I think what Atlas is really getting at is it doesn't really, for what we're talking about today, matter whether or not it's true, but that it is important to acknowledge that this is where young people are. But if you do want to get into that, we can. And essentially, I will say that it's I get where you're coming from, but it is a little bit dismissive to just say, well, show me the evidence. So if we want to get into that, we can talk about how a lot of high-ranking positions, both in the government, in finance, and Hollywood, are basically held by Jews. It's Jewish people in those positions. I forget the name. I'm terrible with names, but there was a high-ranking official in the Trump administration who was fired because he was basically taking orders directly from Netanyahu. And at the end of the day, this shows that not necessarily there's this cabal of that there's this underground upside down pyramid where they meet and shake their hand, but they talk to each other. They have a community and that they do wield power, but to what end is the concern in question.
Well, okay, so here's where you and I can agree on. You could have Jews in there, but it's the degree to which they wield power and how influential is that power. And I think it's critical when you talk about this acceleration, active accelerationism bordering on revolution. If someone's going to create a boogeyman here, if someone's going to create, wherever you're focusing that revolutionary spirit, you have a responsibility to humanity to make sure that those individuals are actually doing, and to the degree which you're saying they're doing, that you just haven't found convenient scapegoats for your anger and your rage. And unfortunately, you can look back throughout history and find that the Jews have been scapegoats for anger and rage, that when the dust finally settles and the ashes are sifted, that they in fact were not responsible for the very things for which they were there was genocide.
Do you think it's possible that there is some credibility to what we are saying?
No, he doesn't. And I read his article in American Thinker. You labeled women, Jews, goats, blacks. You basically put every identity group in there and said they're all used as scapegoats, which means what? It's all white people's fault. I thought your article was pretty obtuse, to be quite honest with you. And the thing is like, this is kind of the defining element of what this contention is here, which is, I'm trying to make a point about a very real and objective thing that everyone can observe, right? The fallout from a lot of Candace Owens and her coverage of Charlie Kirk is because she's playing into the audience of a huge demographic of people who do believe Israel has an over amount of influence on the country. And the first thing you want to do is just stop the conversation from like, and define points on Israel's control, which we can do that. I just didn't prepare for it, but I can go at it with you. The idea here is if you have a revolution on your doorstep from Gen Z, and you don't know where it's coming from or why it's happening, and you keep trying to come up with like, well, maybe it's this region or maybe it's this reason, and everyone's telling you no, it is the overt and obvious fact that Israel cannot be criticized, Jews cannot be criticized, there's an overwhelming influence from the Jewish diaspora, there's honeypot operations, why is everyone in power married to an Israeli? We could go down the line bar for bar, but the point being is if the revolutionary spirit is set in and they do hold this belief that this foreign nation is commandeering American interest, the founding fathers wrote, once the revolutionary spirit sets in, it will not leave. It is unrelenting. That was my broader point with that.
Well, I understand. And you know what? And maybe what we should do.
Chuck, I want to try to convince you.
All right.
I want to tell a story.
Well, let me respond to what he said, because here's my point. And,
Are you censoring me, Chuck?
What's that?
Did you just censor me?
You're gonna get censored.
All right, can I go after you though?
All right, I don't care. It's after that, ask Zeb what he wants to do. Okay, and I think Atlas, what you just said exemplifies the point. What I really hear you saying is, well, people are pissed at Israel, and you can't. They're pissed. And you said we could talk about the degree to which Israel has control within America. And this is my whole point. If you want to sit down and line out to me 100 points where Israel is the puppet master for the United States, then yeah, let's talk about revolution. But just because a large number of people believe that doesn't necessarily make it true. And that's the broader point. And you even said it so yourself. Well, we could debate whether this is, well, then we should debate it, because I'm personally not going to sit there and let stuff like that get tossed without it being challenged. Because if it's true, then it should be defended. And not even defended by saying,
I agree with it. I agree with that take. I agree with the take that just because a lot of people believe something doesn't make it true. I agree with that. And I'm just saying it because I obviously would agree to a certain extent with that crowd. But I guess my point back to that would be, in terms of the specifics here, you're asking me to present to you, and I would go back, why haven't you read Whitney Webb? Why can't you source Brian Dawson? Why am I the one having to come to you, right? It's like, to me, it's like there's obvious sources out there that you can go and find. It's that you've given them no credibility, right? So like, have you read the Blackmail series from Whitney Webb?
Fair of you, because I could look at you and say, why don't you understand postmodern philosophy? Why don't you understand Marxism? Why don't you understand this? Because it's not in your wheelhouse. But if you want to send the sources to me, I'd be happy to read them. I'm not going to tell you that I am. All I've said to you is this. I'm not going to tell you that I am, and nobody would be read on absolutely everything. Send me the sources, and if you want to do that, hey, I would be more than happy to read these and talk with you. All I think what I'm doing here is for me to be, I'm looking at you and saying, okay, and I've said this to you before, if you could show me the evidence that says, yeah, Israel is the puppet master, then it's revolution time.
All right.
I need to see all of the evidence.
Here we go.
And to be able to